Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give people another minute or two to get situated and log in, and then we'll get started with the webinar. Thank you. Good morning again, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm Mark Lamondola, the moderator, and I'll be assisting my colleague today, Missy Hall, the presenter for this webinar. Missy is a program manager for food waste diversion at the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. Missy typically works directly with companies on process assessments and makes recommendations for pollution prevention improvements. She also conducts research to identify industry-wide solutions for waste reduction and pollution prevention. Before we get started today, I just want to go over a few logistical items with the group. First, a recorded version of this webinar will be sent to anyone who has registered immediately following today's session. This webinar is expected to last for approximately 30 minutes, and we've left about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to be used for Q&A. Please use the chat feature to ask any questions. If for whatever reason we're unable to answer all your questions in the allotted amount of time, we'll send out an email summarizing the Q&A portion of this webinar. Before I turn the webinar over to Missy, I just want to provide the group with a brief overview about our organization. We're located at the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is a polytech university located just outside the city of Rochester. For the last 10 plus years, RIT has led a program for the state of New York called the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute, or P2I as a lot of us like to call it. P2I helps businesses and citizens with technical assistance to reduce waste, energy and water usage, and toxic substance use. Today's webinar is focused on best practices for diverting, preventing, and managing wasted food. Now that you have a little bit of an idea of who we are, I'd like to turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Missy Hall.
Thanks, Mark. Just to get started a little bit, set the stage. I know there are a lot of familiar faces in this webinar, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about the impacts of wasted food, since I think a lot of folks here today already know it and breathe it every day. But just to set the stage, wasted food impacts all of us across the supply chain, from the farm level all the way to households and what we end up consuming. Only 55% of what we grow ends up being consumed. 10% of energy consumed in the US goes to food transportation. 50% of land in the US is dedicated to food production, and 80% of fresh water in the US goes to growing and producing food. And then, of course, if it ends up in a landfill, all of those resources that go into creating that food are lost. And then we also have methane generation at landfill. So there's a great opportunity across the entire supply chain to make improvements and retain that resource value that is in our food. The food recovery hierarchy is another, just base level of things that we should all know and breathe every day. It's also a good place to start when we're working with companies or you're interacting with new folks that are engaging with wasted food for the first time. This diagram is adapted from EPA. We use it to help guide decision making when we're working with companies, municipalities, and other groups. Any single location may use more than one option and start in a different order than top down. And it depends on access to resources, level of difficulty, priorities in that specific location. A lot of times when we're working with folks, we start with composting and help them separate their organics. And inherently, by separating out their food scraps, they see opportunities to reduce the amount of waste they're generating to begin with, see opportunities for food donation, as well as source reduction. So next, we're going to share a couple of examples of businesses and organizations that are addressing wasted food across this hierarchy. So we're going to start with a company called Rise Products. They're located in Brooklyn, New York. We worked with them a couple of years ago now to identify opportunities to take spent grain from local breweries and turn that into flour that can be used in different applications. So they were, taking a waste stream and identifying value, and we helped them through this process by performing some product testing, analyzing lab results, evaluating some consumer trends, and providing recommendations back to Rise so they can identify different market potentials based on the types of flours that they were creating. Great opportunities for this company. The flours have a high value of protein and fiber while remaining low in carbohydrates and staying whole grain, which aligns with a lot of trends such as clean labeling and things of that nature. Another example, looking at source reduction and diversion, P2I worked with Outback Steakhouse recently to help them enhance their food waste management program across their different stores. They're already doing a lot of donation, but we help them see if they can set up a diversion program that would allow them to replicate that process across the different stores. So we piloted the process with one of their local chains here in Rochester. We worked with a team within the store to identify a process, look at training, collect some data, identify where bins needed to go, and then created an improvement plan for both that store as well as how they could replicate at their other locations. So this was a great opportunity to not just set them up in that specific location, but identify opportunities to replicate that as well as have long-term engagement and sustainment. A lot of new practices, whether they be food waste related or otherwise, have a high likelihood of failure right after implementation, because you start at that you have a high level engagement immediately, but if you don't have a process in place for that reinforcement, sometimes those things fall off and we lose momentum. So we've focused a lot of our effort on maintaining that momentum and employee engagement for that long-term success. Finally, P2I, just as another example, worked with the village of Clifton Springs to identify the opportunity to incorporate food scraps into their local biosolids composting operation. They had a few champions in this village that were looking to make a difference in their community, identify an outlet to reduce waste going to landfill, and support local businesses. And so we helped them on a couple of different fronts, one of which was partnering with Cornell to do a composting trial where we actually helped them collect food scraps from a couple local businesses and identified how to enhance their existing compost system to incorporate food scraps. Along with that, we helped the village connect with local businesses, do some outreach and education, and identify how the village would be able to scale up their small pilot scale into a larger scale system, collecting from many businesses and local residents. So that implementation plan included equipment and material needs, training, collection strategies, compost process, as well as outreach and education. So now that I've set the stage with a couple of examples, how do you get started? What are the steps that we work with a company on to help implement new projects? So I am a process person through and through for any of those who have met me. So this is going to be very process heavy, but implementing food waste initiatives takes some upfront planning and strategy. A lot of times they are easy to implement and harder to sustain, which is where this process comes into place. So, start with setting goals that are achievable, measurable, supported by both staff or local residents, as well as management, and employee engagement and resident engagement, 100% super important here. Next, connect with local partners on funding and assistance, looking at waste haulers, if there are any industry associations that can help champion this, as well as community partners. Next, doing some data collection with waste estimation. This can either be something that's very quick to do, using online calculators, or complicated using a multi-month process of a waste audit. There are examples both within P2I as well as outside on how to go about this effort. After that is characterization of your waste stream. So it's important to know what the quantity is, but it's also important to know, the who, what, where, when, and why of your food waste. This helps a lot later with improvement opportunities and moving up that hierarchy that EPA has published. Characterization certainly tells you a lot, but once you know a little bit more about your waste stream, it's important to consider the options that you have available. Going back to your goals, are you looking to increase the amount of food you're donating? Are you looking to work with your staff on source reduction or start a diversion program? And with that, you can start to look at your options, leveraging your local partners, understanding what waste haulers are available, and what to address first. From there, training, engaging staff, and looking to make improvements. Not all implementations require a pilot, but this is a great opportunity to try something out, allow staff feedback or local resident feedback with a smaller population, understand the nuances a little bit, and then make improvements for larger scale implementation, which goes into the kind of last step, which is the long-term process of reflecting on that pilot, and then looking to make improvements and growing your process. So just as a brief aside, going through all of those steps, I know we have a lot of municipal folks that are on the line here and have registered for this webinar. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to one of our resources. We have a municipal planning guide for food waste management in your community that goes through a couple of steps that I talked about on the last couple of slides, but more specific to municipalities. I believe Mark is posting a link to those resources now in the chat window. But this is a great place to get started. There are a lot of other resources available for municipalities. Feel free to reach out to us for a little bit more information on that. Next here, focusing on best practices of food waste prevention. I think this is one of the most important areas that sometimes gets overlooked when we're talking about wasted food. And some of us are very good at this, and others it is a process. But on this slide here are 6 high-level best practice strategies, whether it's updating and refining a menu, looking at smaller portions, where smaller portions may be plate size, actual food quantity, trays size in a buffet, etc. Looking at creative use and reuse of ingredients. Use soups or specials on your menu. Think about whole ingredients, not just a portion of one ingredient, and how, you can incorporate all aspects into the recipes that you're using. There are a lot of great resources online about how to yield more from the ingredients that you do buy, which is great. And again, I'll probably reinforce this on every slide. Empower staff and track progress. Hugely important for long-term engagement and sustainment of any changes that you make. Next here, this slide just shows a couple of examples of businesses that we've partnered with and leverage the Center for Ecotechnology to help us document some of the successes and best practices from restaurants and other types of groups around New York State that are already doing good with food waste and doing it well. So these are quick, 1 to 2 page write-ups on the work that these groups are doing. They are great examples. I think it's really important to have peer-to-peer successes that can be shared and not having everything be directed from a resource like myself that's coming from a university. We are always looking for more of these to write. As I said, I think they're really valuable. So if you know of or are a business or group that is doing a lot of great work, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to connect further on writing up a success story. Moving on to some of our online resources to couple with the process that I talked about further. I'm going to start with our Food Waste Essentials eBook. We, P2I, relaunched our website almost a year ago now, and this is one of the outputs that came around that refresh. And it really is a great tool for anyone that's just getting started with wasted food or is looking to do a refresh on any one topic within the high levels of wasted food and food waste management. It has everything from understanding sources to donation best practices to understanding the different types of technologies that are out there and how to determine what may be best for you and your operation. The link that Mark provided earlier should have the Essentials ebook right in there as well. You can also go directly to our website, and I think there's a link on that under our resources page as well. Next is a food waste estimator. That's, I think, one of our most popular tools. This one is, an interactive tool. On the left-hand side there, you can select what type of business or organization. We have probably about a dozen listed there. And then once you select what you're interested in, you can input, for this example, number of students, and it gives you an estimated amount of food waste per week based on that factor. This should just give you a ballpark range of about how much food waste you should expect based on, normalized data from a lot of different sources. So this is a great place to get started. Certainly tells you some information, but the more data you collect, the better here. Next is our organic resource locator. This tool has a lot of different functionality to it. It's also an interactive map that, we see this as a great opportunity for businesses to identify anaerobic digesters or composters that are near them they can partner with to collect their food scraps. It also has, from an AD or a compost side, they can identify food waste generators in their area that they can then collect material from, or identify opportunities to site a new facility based on what businesses are around them. So on the right-hand side, if you can see it, you can choose a layer to different types of businesses, a radius that you're looking for around a specific address, and run your search. Zooming in a little bit here, you can see on this example, I selected retail businesses within 5 miles of Albany that generate more than 2 tons of food waste per week. And those businesses that meet that criteria are highlighted with little pink bubbles around the dots. Those that are retail businesses in that radius, but are less than 2 tons, are shown in the little brown dots there. You can also download all of the results that you make. So, as Mark mentioned at the beginning, P2I is an organization that has state funding, and we have access to a lot of technical resources. So in addition to online tools that we have, P2I is also here to provide direct technical assistance for businesses and organizations looking to make a difference on sustainability challenges. I'm specifically talking about food scraps, but we also have a lot of other types of programs available. So we would work with a company or organization for a couple of months on a specific challenge, either on the assessment side of helping to identify challenges and opportunities, or on the implementation side where we're actually supporting boots on the ground to help address any changes. And the majority of our effort involved in that project is offset using our state funding. So looking at food waste specific types of projects, we're talking about strategy development and implementation, technology assessments, guidance on improvements, and customized education and training. The case studies mentioned earlier are 3 examples of the types of projects that we may do. Moving on a little bit, we have a great opportunity right now at RIT for reduction and diversion reimbursement program, specifically for food waste. We have about $4 million in funding available over the next couple of years to partially reimburse purchases made to reduce, donate, or divert excess food or food scraps from landfill, which is a great opportunity that we don't have often. So I encourage those who may be eligible to take a look and reach out to us for more information. Types of purchases may be things like bins for a diversion program, in-vessel composting unit, dehydrators, etc. We can also help you determine what types of things you might be looking to install as well. Just as a brief shout out, the EPA Food Recovery Challenge is a great opportunity for all types of organizations to get some recognition for the work that they're already doing in food recovery. P2I is an endorser of this program, so we're looking to promote the value of something like this. Active participants range from food manufacturers to K-12 schools to sporting venues and restaurants. They run the full gambit, but this is just a nice opportunity to share what the work that you're already doing. It's really easy to participate. You can register online, set baseline information on your generation rates, create a goal and actions that you plan to participate in, and then report on your progress. Please let us know if this is something that you do get involved in as a result of our conversation today. We always want to hear about the successes and folks that are taking that next step. Finally, before we move on to some questions, I did want to let folks know who aren't already aware that in New York State, we do have a food donation and food scraps recycling law that's coming January 1st, 2022. I won't spend a lot of time going over the nuances, but if you're looking to hear more, you can go to DEC's website that's dedicated to this, that I think Mark is posting in the chat. You can submit your questions directly to DEC or receive updated information via the SurveyMonkey that is linked above as well. So thank you very much for participating and listening in today. Please feel free to reach out to us for more information and take next steps around wasted food and food scraps.
Thank you very much, Missy. Very informative, a lot of information. I've seen some questions come through, so we'll spend the next few minutes on questions. The first question that came in was from Ben. The question was, what is the process involved if we wanted to do a project with P2I?
Great question. So it is a really easy process to work with us. If you reach out directly to myself or through the inbox listed and let us know what you're looking to do, we will connect you with the right resource at P2I and start a conversation about what challenges that you have and what kind of assistance P2I can provide. It really is a customized service, I think, that we offer. And so depending on what your needs are, we'll write up a scope of work and tasks and go back and forth until we identify the specific thing that P2I can help with.
Great, thanks, Missy. Okay, the next question that I saw come in was from Diane. Her question was, how do we go about addressing the problems of contaminated food scraps headed to a composting facility?
This is a fantastic question that comes up often at different types of engagements. I think it really depends on where the contamination is being identified. I think as much as you're able to go upstream to the point of generation, the better you are. You know, if you're seeing it at the compost facility, you might not have much of an opportunity to change what's coming into you other than, you know, telling the folks up the chain. But at a compost facility in different places, we've seen depackagers purchased to help separate out some of those contaminants to make it a cleaner stream for composting or anaerobic digestion. You know, then obviously inform haulers who then inform generators about reducing contamination. Long-term education and training obviously is hugely important. Looking at the facility itself to see if there are ways to reduce the amount of contaminants available for those issues to take place. So we've seen some facilities get rid of single-use plastic items in their kitchen areas or in their dining facilities to help mitigate the opportunity for waste to be generated. You know, in some cases also switching over to compostable ware is another opportunity. But this one is a huge question that's not really able to be answered in, you know, 30-second time frame, but happy to talk more if you have a specific example that you're looking to solve. sorry, we're looking at some questions here. Yeah, go ahead with that one.
Okay, the next question that came in was from Sarah. Her question is, what is an incentive for a business to collect and send their food waste to composting sites? Is there an estimate amount of the carbon emission reduction created by composting rather than sending food waste to a landfill?
Great question, Sarah. There are a lot of motivations, one of which is the law that's coming in 2022 for, the larger generators across New York State. So we're talking about 2 tons or more per week. Excuse me. In addition to that, some businesses we interact with have, sustainability missions. They're looking to go zero waste. They see the benefit of helping out their local community and reducing the amount of food waste going to landfill. In some cases, there aren't as many motivations if you don't think about the environment or sustainability aspects, because landfilling in a lot of places is still very inexpensive. That's when we're working with companies and we focus on the source reduction and donation aspects, because that is opportunities to, do good and also save money in your operation. As far as your second part of the question goes, I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but EPA does have published data on the carbon emissions associated with the different source reduction, donation, anaerobic digestion, composting, and landfill. I think they even have a calculator out there that goes into that. If you look up the EPA WARM model, you should be able to find that pretty easily.
Okay, and another question that just came in from John, and just for the purposes of time, this will probably be the last question we do address, just so we're respectful of everyone's time on your end. But like I said in the beginning, any questions that we weren't able to answer, we will follow up with you directly. So again, this question comes in from John, and his question is, are there any resources geared toward food recovery agencies, such as food pantries or soup kitchens?
So great question, John. There are some materials available, there has been funding available, to food recovery agencies that DEC has had available. I don't think there's any active funding at the moment, but that is something that has been available in the past that allows food recovery agencies to, build up capacity and improve their operations some, recognizing that this new law coming in 2022 may yield, more food recovery across the system. As far as, materials and educational resources go, I'm less familiar with those, but I would start with your local food bank and see what kinds of things they might be able to have access to that can help you on your specific challenge.
Great. Thank you very much, Missy. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning for this very informative webinar. As I mentioned, we will follow up with everyone individually, and any questions that we did not get to and weren't able to address at this time, we will follow up with you as well. Feel free to check out our website for additional resources, or feel free to reach out to myself or Missy Hall, and we'd be happy to help you out or direct you to the right place. Again, thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.